Hey everybody, welcome back to We Are Podcast Network. This is Movie Amnesia, Season 1, Episode 3, Bad Dreams, featuring Jay McClintock. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, thank you so much. Please go to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast a like. And if you get a chance, head over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. We're at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at /We Are Podcast. With that said, on to the podcast. All right, everyone, welcome to Movie Amnesia, a podcast about movies we have not seen in a long time. You ever watch a movie when you were a kid and you remember you kind of liked it, but you've slowly forgotten all the cool bits and pieces of that movie? Well, that's what this podcast is about. It's about bringing back those old memories and seeing how much we actually remember about our past. As we know, memory is faulty at best. So maybe these things happened in the movie, maybe they didn't. When I was a kid, my brother believes this, that we drove past Disneyland in Florida. He saw it, he pointed at it, he wanted to go, my parents said no, and we drove past. It never happened. That's not real. But that's what this podcast is about, is trying to remember, pull those little bits and pieces out of the back of your brain and make something cohesive out of it. So today I got a very special guest. I'm going to say movie expert. Jay McClintock is here with me today. And I am pumped to watch this movie. Jay, how are you doing this morning?
Doing great.
Excellent, excellent. We are going to watch the 1988 movie Bad Dreams. I would say classic, but I don't know how many people actually know about this movie. I know I didn't until Jay brought it to my attention. I want to talk real quick about your history with this movie and how your aunt introduced you to movies when you were younger.
This is one of those things you talk about memory. I almost think maybe, I always say I liked horror movies, so she brought me these movies. I actually think maybe she brought me these movies, so that made me like horror movies. Just thinking about that, yeah. Because it wasn't just Bad Dreams, but like, she had a real affinity for a little bit of the off-kilter stuff. Mm-hmm. Bad Dreams, there's another one called Deep Star 6. It came out around the same time as another movie called Leviathan, which is another movie that kind of like fell away from, or came from like The Abyss, like all these little deep sea ones. But Bad Dreams was one that quite interesting to me because of the tones and everything that's entailed in it. And it does discuss a few other things that even at a young age I hadn't actually been exposed to, even from the news. It borrows a little bit from real life as well as other movies around the time. I mean, if you could think about it, what other movie in the 80s talked about bad dreams? And yes, we will have to go there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And real quick, you think that's where you began, like your obsession with movies? Because what Jay can do is amazing. Jay, you could give him a movie, he can tell you, it doesn't matter what movie it is, he can tell you the month it came out, the year it came out.
Maybe not month.
Most of the time. He can almost, I've seen you get down to the day, which is bizarre. But it's a crazy thing, and like people just be like, "Hey, ask Jay a movie real quick, and he'll tell you what year it came out, or around the time it came out." And it's insane. I would say you have like a 90% accuracy, maybe 95% accuracy. I think you got stumped one time.
Oh no,
you were still close.
Yeah, I do get stumped, obviously. I mean, it's just and here's the thing: people are like, "Why do you remember that?" And I was like, "Believe me, if I could, I would definitely turn that off and remember other things." Your mind, it really doesn't seem to choose what sticks to it. And that's just one of those things that kind of just stick to it.
And that's what we were saying before we started podcasting here. We were talking about Nightbreed. I've never seen the movie before, and Jay was selling it hardcore. It's a movie I definitely want to check out, movie I've always wanted to see. And he was talking about the genres of movies. And he was breaking down the subgenres of horror.
Yeah.
And we were talking, what did you say your favorite subgenre of horror was?
Well, that one really deals with a lot of it, and it's dark fantasy horror. Because it, you can create rich storylines while also creating really good visuals, and you don't have to necessarily be afraid of the violence either. That's one thing I think Nightbreed, talking about it really, really does well, is that it is a violent movie. It is a gory movie, while at the same time it's also very beautiful. But it's Clive Barker, and any Clive Barker movie, even if he's not directing it, you can kind of tell his stamp on it from his like literature going to screen. Like even Candyman. A lot of people, like you talk about memory or Mandela effect, there's actually quite a few people that actually think Clive Barker directed Candyman.
He didn't, no.
He didn't direct it, but everyone thinks he did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, his name was attached to most of that stuff he made, especially in the 80s into the 90s, correct?
Right. As far as I know, he didn't direct a lot. He really didn't direct a lot of
Did he even direct Hellraiser?
He directed the first Hellraiser, yeah. He directed the first Hellraiser, he directed Nightbreed. I want to say he directed Midnight Meat Train, I want to say he did.
Now, if you've never seen Midnight Meat Train, that movie is killer. It is amazing. It will stick with you. It's one of those movies that slightly haunted me. I was kind of prepared for it before I saw it.
I think it's funny is, Midnight Meat Train, it stars Bradley Cooper.
And, what's his name?
Vinnie Jones.
Yeah, Juggernaut.
He's not the Juggernaut.
Not anymore. The Juggernaut. But, if you've never seen it before, you've got to check this movie out. It is very much, I would say it's a gore fest and a half. The ending is amazing. The movie kind of has a different tone, first half and second half, but it works because...
If you look at all of Clive Barker's movies in general, they deal with some sort of almost like contract that the characters sign with whatever they're dealing with. If you look at Hellraiser, they got the puzzle box. You look at Candyman, you got the mirror. You look at Midnight Meat Train, and obviously how that...
You're hitting a Shyamalan type thing here, Jay.
What do you mean?
You're giving away the ending of that movie a little bit.
Oh, well, you'll just see. You'll see.
Yeah. You gotta watch it. And I would say that movie, I agree with you. There is a through line of the contract.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's other people, like, the only ones I could say who probably went off the rails quite a bit are all the Hellraisers after 3.
Well, the sequels. I mean, he probably didn't own the rights. I think that was New Line Cinema who had the rights to those, maybe.
Possibly.
But I don't think he owned the rights after a certain point. You see the same thing that happened with Nightmare on Elm Street, which, Wes Craven made the first one, created the character. That is New Line Cinema. And then, what was Bob Shea who did New Line Cinema? He would originally, as a producer, just go out, find these movies that were kind of cheap, go out places and screen them and make the money off of that. Yeah. And finally, he's like, man, I can make a lot more money off of this if I did my own movie. And that's whenever Wes Craven and him got connected, and they made Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, which was a massive hit.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Once we got to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which I like both of those movies about the same level.
If you talk to most people, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is probably... It's not the most polarizing movie because it's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is definitely what I would say is the most polarizing movie. But 1 and 3 are pretty much everyone's contenders for which one's the best in the franchise.
Right, and I think you do need 1 to have 3. You can watch it separately if you want to, because they do retell the lore, and they go from a very different angle in that, where they go from the kids that have had the nightmares before and are in this insane asylum.
But it really feels like there's a lot of time that passed between 1 and 3.
Absolutely. The point that Nancy comes back, and we think she died in the first movie, the dream sequence at the end with the car, flipping the lid. And then we go to 3 where she just shows up and she's a counselor and she's like, I've dealt with this before and we have to be prepared. And going back to the first movie where she prepared herself in the dream world, she drugged Freddy out. She took him to the real world. She set up her Home Alone type traps and everything, take him down. And then she goes, no, we're going to go after him this time. We're not in a safe place, even though we're in the safest place. And we're going to go into the dream world and fight him there. Yeah. And that's what I kind of want to say is the punk rock girl, who goes out pretty quick.
I know, it's nuts, but yeah.
The woman who plays the punk rocker, she was a heroin addict, I believe.
Yeah, she was a heroin addict. She was, she was just another one of the poor, unfortunate kids of Elm Street, a druggie, an addict. And to be honest, it's kind of shocking to me that she actually lasted as long as she did on Elm Street, considering she was a drug addict, because considering drugs will put you to sleep faster than anything.
Oh, absolutely. She's got a heroin nod out, and then all of a sudden Freddy's going to show up with his needles. What was her name again?
Jennifer Rubin.
Okay, and that's what I kind of want to talk about, because this is how Jay sold the movie to me. He said, Nightmare on Elm Street, we're talking about that. He's like 3. He goes, man, there's this weird movie I haven't seen in years. He goes, my aunt gave it to me. He goes, I barely remember it, but I remember that I liked it. And he goes, it's got the same girl from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in this movie. He goes, and I remember they were so much alike because of the setting of the psychiatric ward and the dreams and stuff like that. And so that's what I want to kind of talk about. What do you remember about Bad Dreams?
Well, like I said, Jennifer Rubin, so she's really dumbed down a lot. She's very strung out looking in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. But to be honest, she was actually a model.
I believe it.
She's actually like a...
Oh, no, I didn't care that... Listen, I didn't care that she was strung out. Like, in that movie, when she shows up with the mohawk and stuff like that, I'm like, nice.
Yeah. She's a gorgeous girl. And she's just one of the characters. But Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 came out in 87. Mm-hmm. And then, in 1988, there's another movie that comes out dealing with dreams and, dying in your dreams, so to speak, and whatnot. And this time around, she's no longer the bit part. She is the girl.
She's the Nancy of this
movie.
Pretty
much. Yeah, she's definitely the Nancy of the story.
Now, what do you remember being the setup for the movie?
Okay, this is definitely what I remember. I remember a girl is part of a cult. And I didn't know anything about Jonestown at the time. So now, I'm 37. I know all about every kind of cult there could possibly be. If you know anything about like Jonestown or cults of that nature, they typically end up with a mass suicide. Well, in this one, they didn't drink the Kool-Aid. They were in a little more metal, which is definitely what you'd say. They decided to burn themselves.
What?
Yeah, death
All right.
by...
I have to say, I have not watched the movie yet. We're going to watch it here in a minute. I am pumped to see this movie.
But that's what I'm saying. That's just, and again, I tell you, but it's got a lot of comparisons to Elm Street. Fire, obviously, being a big element in the creation of Freddy. Fire is also quite the element in creating the big bad in this movie. And the big bad in this movie, we're talking about character actors. I believe the actor's name is Richard Lynch. You might want to look him up. He's just got one of those faces. He's just like he's just got one of those just evil faces.
The picture online, he's got almost like a Hannibal-like face is what I'm seeing here.
Oh yeah, I would kind of compare him to, he could have pulled off Hannibal Lecter.
So for the character, does he stick around or?
Well, that's just it. From what I remember is they all killed themselves by burning, and Jennifer Rubin's character is the lone survivor. But she's not left unscathed. She's put into a coma.
Oh, really?
And she's put into like a 14, 15-year coma when she wakes up. And she starts having these visions of this, cult leader. And then it's starting to not just affect her, but the other people that are in it. One thing that I will say that separates the big bad from this movie, and I can't remember his name, I can't remember her name, I can really just remember faces and a few actions here and there. But the difference between Freddy Krueger and this guy is that Freddy Krueger went out and he sought out victims. And I will say this, I think the bad guy in Bad Dreams, I think he's scarier.
Is he?
Because I don't think he's as redeeming. I don't think he's I would say he's seductive, more charismatic, whereas Freddy's just a little more,
Do you remember what his motivation was to do the cult thing and have everyone kill themselves?
I think it's just the same thing with all cults. I mean, they all come from someone who just wants power, and ultimately, I think they want to be worshipped. Any cult leader, they want to be exalted.
This character, what you're telling me is he's able to control from beyond the grave,
something like that. And but that's the other thing is, and to be honest, if I were to really start. Now that it's really starting to, chip in, from what also I remember is that in the movie, it's almost like a predecessor to Saw, and that when people people die in this movie, they kill themselves.
Oh, really? So
even though they're, I believe they're influenced by their interaction with him in the dream or their dreams in general. At the end of the day, he's not the one.
So we see the dream sequences in the movie.
As far as I remember, and you definitely see them killing themselves.
All right. So
and there are some viciously graphic kills in this.
Wow. All right, I'm excited.
This movie looked like it was supposed to be kind of a launch pad for quite a few careers. You may recognize who you recognize, you may not. You'll see a few characters and you'll go, wow. It's almost like a completely character actor driven movie, which I always love.
Is there a lot of deaths in that you remember? Any specific ones?
Oh, there's at least 3 that I remember.
So what 3 can you pull?
One was Dean Cameron. I believe he takes a scalpel and slits his own throat, or definitely does something with a scalpel, I believe, and slits his own throat or slits his wrist or something like that. There's a character in the movie who's a psychiatrist who has got a boss, and he kills his boss by running him over with a car and smashing him into the thing. And the side of this parking garage, he does it, but he doesn't actually do it. He just thinks about it, but he thinks about it so vividly you think it actually happens. But the number one death I remember is there's this older couple, and they're I remember them hugging and they're all smiling and just looking at each other, and all of a sudden they both throw themselves into one of those giant steel industrial.
Oh, hell yeah!
So,
wait, like a fan?
Like a big, you ever seen Idle Hands?
Yeah. The ones in the ceiling.
Well, but this one's on the side, so imagine jumping into it.
Oh, fuck yeah! All right, I'm totally down with that. That you're right. In my mind, I'm hoping it's the same in the movie. That is awesome.
Yeah, I think that I've only seen maybe 3 steel fan deaths I saw that one. There was one in Alien 3, and then the one in Idle Hands. So
that stuff's terrifying.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, man. After this movie, it was probably one of my biggest fears ever.
I think that there is a precedent for that because when you were a kid, did you ever stick your finger into the fan whenever it was sitting there, the plastic fan or anything like that?
No.
No. All right. Then you weren't an idiot, thank God. But I have definitely done that, all right? And there's something about the jolt. Like, I always knew not to do it with the metal one. Oh, but definitely the plastic one. I was just like, I want to see what happens. And I want to know if it'll stop it or not.
It's just like touching your hand to the stove.
Absolutely. Just like, I want to see what happens. And oh, man, I'm pumped to see that. So, the main character, what did she really do in this movie? You were kind of implying that because she was in the cult, she survived, that she might be the cause of these? Do you remember if she is or not?
She might be the conduit for them to... for him to get to all these other people because she talks about him, and that's another comparison to.
So bringing back the memory,
bring back the memory.
Nightmare on Elm Street. They forgot about Freddy. That was always a big thing. So they're like, if they forgot, he can't get in the dreams. They try to squash all the memories.
And that's another thing. And like in part 3, they try to use medicine to kind of stop this. In this one, the whole thing takes place in the psych ward, in a hospital. So the whole thing's about using medicine to suppress nightmares and all that stuff And so, but she's also holds the key, I believe, to stopping him and whatnot. And that's another thing. This movie is a standalone movie, especially in the shadow of Nightmare on Elm Street. It definitely couldn't hold up. Right. However, I think there are parts of it that are vastly superior. If anything, I wish the movie would have been made 10 years earlier, and I think Nightmare on Elm Street could have still been made, and they would have been able to coexist. But the fact that Nightmare on Elm Street came out first, I think really doomed this movie.
Is there anything else that you can pull from your memory? Do you remember the end of the movie?
Yeah, for the most part, I do remember that, like, they do win. And you do see, the cult leader, you see him in his burned state and his normal state throughout the movie. So it's not all just burned. Like, you see him in his various states. Yeah, I couldn't tell you which one's scarier. This guy's just a scary dude. But yeah, there's a lot of deaths. There's a lot of unfortunate deaths. There's some mullets.
All right, I'm down with that.
Yeah, there's plenty.
I love me an 80s mullet. I love me a 2018 mullet.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bring the pain. I'll bring my MacGyver here. There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, it's got all those little, horror movie tropes. You got your wisecracking characters. You got your old grizzled character. You have, the people that care. And then, of course, you have, like, your main character. I mean,
real quick, before we head into watching the movie, which I will provide a link if you all want to watch the movie and then come back and see what we have to say after. What was the key moment of this movie that made you go, I really want to watch that again?
I gotta be honest. Every October I do my Ego Phoenix Fear cast, and it's just I've had different rules for every year, and this year I chose gore. Like I was like, for gore, it rhymes. So everything I'm picking has to have at least some graphic imagery in it. I was thinking about like all the classic ones. I was like Friday the 13th, and I was thinking Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. Like they have some stuff. And then I remember the fan scene, and I was like, where?
Oh yeah.
And the fan scene, I was like, where did I see it? And I was like, oh, it's that. And I was like, oh, Bad Dreams. Wow.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten classic.
You came up to me and you were like, if we're doing this movie Amnesia, we've got to do this movie. And you said it with like such passion. I was like, all right, I'm down with that. I kind of want to see that.
Plus, it's kind of cool. It kind of goes with the theme of your show is, like, it's been 14 years since this girl was in a coma.
That's true.
It's been 20 years since I've seen it. I mean, it's just, I think, honestly, when I first saw it, I think I saw this movie before I saw any Nightmare on Elm Street.
Wow.
And so I think part of me actually thought that it was part of the franchise.
Right.
And especially when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street and I saw the similarities, maybe, man, yeah.
Well, it goes down to the idea of, like, whenever you have two competing movies. Like, in the 90s, we had Armageddon.
And
Deep Impact. And then you had
There's a movie called Existence.
Oh, yeah, and then...
The Matrix.
Yeah, The Matrix. And then I like both versions. I like The Matrix better, of course. But it does deal with the virtual reality world. That was a David Cronenberg movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's... And it's very Cronenberg. So if you've never seen that movie, it's got Jude Law in it, go watch it.
When you talk about Cronenberg, you can't talk about Cronenberg without another genre of horror, which is called body horror.
Right. But yeah, we're going to get into watching this movie. We will be back, and we will discuss the things that Jay did forget in the movie. We're going to talk about that fan scene, because I can't wait to see that, and talk a little bit more about the parallels between this and Nightmare on Elm Street. Hey everyone, it's just Duck jumping in here real quick to say thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you're enjoying it, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes. and give We Are Podcast a like. And if you get a chance, head over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And if you're enjoying the podcast today, please share with your friends. It's the only way we can grow this network. With that said, back to the podcast. All right, everyone, we are back. We just watched Bad Dreams, the 1988 classic, I'm going to say now, that no one knows about.
Nobody.
I'm providing the link. Please go watch it. I know that that's probably not the cool thing to do. You could buy it on Amazon if you want, but just go fucking watch this movie. It was worth the hour and 19 minutes that it is long.
It's only an hour and 20 minutes?
Only an hour and 20 minutes. That's it. It's totally 100% worth your time. Check out this movie. Jay, what did you think?
Man, it brought back a lot of memories, man. That killer twist at the end I thought was pretty cool. And the whole time, as you were watching it, you kept making all your comparisons to Nightmare on Elm Street, and you were like, well, there's this, and there's that, and there's this, and there's that. And then it throws that one big curveball in the end, and you're like, oh,
and that's the thing, is even as we were watching, I was like, Jay, I'm pretty sure you kept this from me, and I could kind of see it coming, the twist ending. But before we get to the twist, we'll just kind of walk through the movie a little bit, and we'll see what you remember, what you didn't remember. We were at the beginning of the movie,
right?
And we had the cult, and immediately it sets an amazing tone. It sets a very serious tone, which I really liked about the movie. I thought it was going to be more along the 80s horror movie, slasher, or fantasy aspect stuff, and it kind of stays grounded. So the fantastical elements, they are there, but it's just enough that they can ground it, which they end up doing in the end.
Right.
And what we really liked was, at the beginning, the cult... you remember that they were set on fire, but we didn't know why they were set on fire or how. And the first thing you said was the oil. He's anointing all of his followers with gasoline.
Yeah, literal petroleum.
And the main character comes in, and she seems a little bit hesitant. And we end up finding out later she actually tried to escape after he lit them all on fire, because there's a scene a little bit later on. Was there anything leading up to when she wakes up 14 years later, or whatever it was from coma, that you caught that you didn't remember?
The parts I don't remember is actually them taking her to the hospital and whatnot, and the way they actually tried to save her and whatnot. From what I remember, it was basically, it explodes, and then, next thing you know, she's waking up. But I forgot about that transition where, they show the full explosion. They don't initially show you them all getting set on fire.
Mm-hmm. Which we get there. I want to talk about real quick, though, the transitional music aspect of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
How it begins with a 70s almost sha-la-la-la live for today.
Oh, yeah, for
music.
sure. Like,
very Flower Child, playing into the cult hippie aspect of it.
Oh, for sure.
And then the whole opening scene where they have the girl in the hospital where they're saving her. She's in a coma, but they're cleaning her up.
It almost seemed like the not just that, but almost the cinematography a little bit. It had a little bit of that grainy...
I agree with you.
70s,
and what
Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe.
That's one of the biggest things I liked about this movie is the cinematography.
Yeah.
It was amazing. When you really look at what they did between grounding it in reality, like you said, having it almost like 70s. I remember... I looked at you and I said, boy, this feels like what it would feel like to be in a cult. Like, this is very realistic looking.
Oh, yeah.
And then the more supernatural elements, they do the cool angles. They do the cool lighting. They change those things. They make things almost dreamlike.
Yeah.
But the music, that was a great choice. And then as you get into the 80s, they literally say, hey, we're in the 80s now, as they're having their little group meeting in the hospital.
Right.
And then she's like, well, I'm trying to get acclimated to the 80s. And then it really is an 80s vibe to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and that's what's nuts. You think about it. So the movie was released in 1988, so I'm guessing the setting is obviously around there. So I guess it was actually a 13-year coma, I think they said. So let's say it's 1975 when it starts out. And she's really missed the 80s. And we're talking, she's about to be done with Reagan's entire administration.
Right. Yeah.
Like Bush is about to get elected, older Bush. So it's weird to see someone who missed all that, I mean, as a child of the 80s myself, granted, I was only in the 80s for a decade. I was born in 81, so... I didn't even get to experience it as much as other people did.
You get to remember the last part of it, though.
Oh, for sure. One of my biggest dreams I always told people is I wish I might have been born like 10 years earlier so I could have really experienced the 80s.
Right.
But
And that's what we were talking about, too, is I think the 80s are coming back around. I think we are all of the age, people between the ages of 30 and 40 right now, that's going to be the shift in popular culture. We're seeing that already with synthwave music. We're seeing that with the styles that are coming back.
Yeah, because you see this this movie transitions from the 70s to that synthwave. It almost feels modern.
It does, in a bizarre way. And I actually asked Jay during the movie, I was like, are 80s haircuts coming back? Because this doesn't seem that out of place anymore.
Not at all.
So it must be happening that we're bringing back the mullets, like we said.
Oh, yeah.
We're bringing back all that stuff.
The mullets, big hair.
And I'm not looking forward to the 90s because I do not want to get a bowl cut again. I'm good on that.
And just be glad you have the hair to get a bowl cut.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll see. It's already, I got the widow's peak going on. We want to talk about the scene wherever they go back and she starts having flashbacks about what happened to her in the
Right.
home.
She starts remembering.
This movie did something I've never seen before that really was exciting cinematically to me, was the anointing his followers with gasoline and then lighting the match, and the match spiders out to each of them, and they're just sitting watching and loving and adoring their leader. And as they all catch fire, they all have smiles on their face, and you hear a baby crying. So I didn't see a baby anywhere, but it insinuates that there's small children there. And then you do see small children, and as these people catch on fire, it looked good enough. Like you said, the graphics weren't great.
Yeah,
they worked.
They weren't amazing, and there's even one part where we see someone crawling away, and you're like, oh, well, see, now they're regretting it. But no, they're actually crawling towards their mother, who's also crawling towards them.
Exactly, and so it sets up where they were and what their mindset was. And it also kind of sets up the adoration that they had in the character who survived, whose name was...
Cynthia.
It sets up her admiration. Even though she's afraid of the cult leader, she's still, in a weird way, is attracted to him.
Yeah.
But she's having these flashbacks of what happened when she was in the cult, and then she's seeing the cult leader running around. Harris. The cult leader...
Franklin Harris is his full name.
So Franklin Harris, the cult leader, is showing up in the hospital with her. And almost as a vision, like no one else can see him. That really sets in the tone for the movie, where she thinks because she's there, and they even think at one point that she's causing the murder somehow. Because
almost like she's bringing him new followers, so to speak.
And then she's channeling his spirit. And then at one point she even gets blamed for the murders. So we'll kind of get into the murders here.
Let's also not forget about a character I forgot about.
The detective.
Detective Wasserman.
And as we were calling him, Danny Glover.
Yeah.
He was Murtaugh, basically. And what was so funny is how straight he was. I was literally going, is he from Detroit? He literally was like, what is this motherfucker?
Yeah.
It was crazy.
And then that pharmacist, played by Charles Fleischer.
And towards the end of the movie, we'll get into.
Yeah.
But he does mention that they're in Detroit.
Yeah. And so... It was like, oh my god, you called it.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I was just like, he's so fucking street, he doesn't give a shit.
Well, Detroit was a hot place for cops in the 80s. You forget Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley's from RoboCop, and then Action Jackson.
Detroit?
Yeah, also. Yeah. Oh, it was all about car makers and whatnot.
That's fucking awesome.
If you want to be a badass cop, you pretty much had to be from Detroit.
Oh, dude, and we'll get into what he does at the end of the movie that made me so happy.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. So it sets up, they're in this group, there's a bunch of different people. It sets up our characters who are the people who need to be hospitalized. It's like a psychiatric ward, I guess. They didn't really specify what it was.
Yeah, they are. It's definitely something of that vein, because they all suffer from BPD, which is... borderline personality disorder. I wonder if that is also like bipolarism. I mean, but they
go together hand in hand. But with this, each of these characters had a trope trait to them, I should say. There was the one guy who was the cutter. We had the older lady with the red hair who was a reporter or something like that.
Who also tried to commit suicide.
We had the couple that was in there. I'm not sure what their story was, but there seemed to be some anger issues there, possibly.
Sure.
But they were a couple inside the asylum. I don't think she was all about it, but he was. We have E.G. Daly, who was the...
Feels very alone. Like very... And I took psychology a billion years ago, and they talk about schizoid. It's not schizophrenia, but it's called schizoid.
What is that?
It's I believe it's a condition where it's basically like feeling like a loner, but it's on a toxic level.
And who had that?
I think that was E.G. Daly's character.
Oh, okay, I got
you. Felt very alone. Felt like she didn't belong anywhere.
I was just going to call her the emo chick.
Yeah, well, you saw her. Yeah, she had that ring haircut.
Yeah, like the devil's lock or whatever they called it. And I was just like falling in love. E.G. Daly, by the way, is the voice of Tommy Pickles on Rugrats. And she's done the voice of pretty much every other cartoon character that you probably enjoyed for the last 20 years. She was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She was in The Devil's Reject. She plays a prostitute. And she is smoking hot.
She's also in Valley Girl.
She's just adorable. And then we had the Whoopi Goldberg. They didn't really specify what her...
Yeah, she seemed kind of out there.
I feel like something about her religious aspect, like she felt like she was super connected to God or something like that.
That's why I feel like she actually felt like she was connected to Cynthia. But she came off very... what's the word? Passive, dismissive, like almost like she was,
and super judgmental too.
Yeah,
she'd just be like, "Bitch, you killed that girl." That's what this movie begins with. We talk about the connection between Cynthia and Harris and the murders, but they're not murders. They're killings, but they're not killings.
Right.
And so it's a bizarre thing where the first one is emo girl talks to Cynthia in the locker room. And Jay pointed out a very interesting fact that for some reason with the robes, they were wearing tank tops underneath or something like that.
Yeah, they just got out of the shower. They're wearing bathrobes, but underneath the bathrobes, they're wearing like full uniform.
She goes, "You want to be friends?" And Cynthia basically goes, "Bitch, I don't want to be friends. I just woke up. I had friends and they killed themselves." So this bothered E.G. Daily. She runs off and she goes and she sits down in front of a swimming pool. And that's when I went, "Oh, this bitch is going out." And I thought that. I didn't say it, but I thought this bitch is going out. Then it's a really cool thing where the movie had been grounded to that point that all of a sudden it becomes very like Nightmare on Elm Street.
She starts having visions of, and of course now you're like, are these nightmares? Are they just visions, hallucinations? Are they memories? And yeah, again they go to the spot where she was baptized by Harris when she was part of the cult. The cult, by the way, I don't know if we gave you all the name. It was Unity Fields, and. The reason they call themselves Unity is because they believe in love and unity and all that stuff, and they obviously believed in unifying themselves through death by fire, which is, woo! That's an extreme. That is an extreme.
The baptism, something really cool happened during that scene where he's dipping her into the water, and it's Cynthia, and somewhere it transitions from Cynthia to emo girl as he's dipping her in the water. And he pulls her back out, and he dips her again. And did he hold her down in there or something like that?
That's what it looked like. Like she's,
And then you're like, all right, so the Cynthia girl is having this flashback while in the locker room, and all of a sudden you hear somebody screaming. And emo girl has drowned in the pool that she sat next to.
Right.
So it sets up a little bit of the mystery where you go, did she go out there? Did she drown her? They show up, one of the orderlies shows up, jumps in the water, grabs her. First person dies. And then at the meeting, which we need to talk about, they set up earlier with the meeting, the one character named Ralph who's sitting there, and he's trying to kind of connect to Cynthia, who just came out of this coma, and talk to her.
And Ralph is played by Dean Cameron. A lot of people will recognize Dean Cameron as Chainsaw from Summer School.
And in this movie, he's the cutter, and that plays in later.
Yeah, he's definitely the cutter of the group.
Yeah, and so he's acting like normal, and then you buy that he is the therapist leader,
Oh yeah. To segue to what Duck's saying, when Cynthia first goes to group, Dean Cameron presents himself as the Dr. Carmen, who's actually played by Bruce Abbott, and he does a pretty good, convincing job. But it's more of a comic relief spot than anything.
Because he just all of a sudden starts hitting on her, and then the actual doctor shows up, who Jay goes, I always thought that was the guy who played Casey Jones from Turtles.
I never thought it was. I always called him the poor man's Casey Jones.
All right. And that's what cracked me up, because at first I was like, okay, and then I saw it almost immediately. And then you ended up throughout the movie finding out something interesting.
Well, yeah, okay, so everyone who watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles knows that Elias Koteas played Casey Jones. Elias Koteas was also in a religious horror movie called Prophecy with Christopher Walken. It was a mild hit in 95. And then all of a sudden in the sequel, his character, whose name is Thomas Daggett, is actually played by this guy who played Dr. Carmen. I didn't know that. I did not know that going
in the middle of it, he goes, that is great, because I've been calling him for years the poor man's version.
Yeah.
And what's cracking me up, this is why we call Jay the movie expert. Notice how he dropped all those names and names of characters and everything. He wasn't looking at his phone. He just had that in the back of his head, that he pulled all that stuff. So it's insanity. So anyhow, they're having the meeting, and immediately the doctor, I'm going to call him Dr. Casey Jones, because that's what he looks like.
Right.
He starts hitting on Cynthia, who just came out of a coma, and I'm like, that's creepy, that's weird, what the fuck? I was like, that's not appropriate, but whatever.
Yeah, they do have kind of an inappropriate relationship.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't even say chemistry. It's just him crushing hardcore on a coma girl.
Right.
It's freaking weird, and I thought it was weird the whole movie, but that's just the way it goes, I guess. So the first girl dies. Emo girl goes out. They go back to the meeting, and then she kind of says about her past with the cult and what happened. And it starts to build on her fears of maybe she's causing these things to happen. And then they do at a point, the Wilbur girl does kind of blame her. She's like, it's your fault. And then she just kind of gets up and walks away.
And she says, you have no power over him and all that. And
right.
It's like, well,
and so it's that weird connection she has, that religious connection. I guess she kind of believes already that it's going to be the Harris, the cult leader, is coming back. The second person, and literally this is like a slasher film because people just get knocked off. The second person who gets knocked off...
Second one was the reporter because, remember...
That's right, the red-haired reporter.
She wanted to use Cynthia's story to, I guess, help give her like a second lease on life as far as a career goes. Because, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, it is pretty insane. You know, you're the sole survivor of a cult. Everyone wants to know, what it was like and all that. And they actually, in the movie, they do show, old TV,
Yeah, that was what was cool. And I kind of said that it looked like footage from Heaven's Gate cult, kind of that kind of stuff. And so they do build it up nicely in the beginning. It shows that he had his power over people, and she wants to do a report on it, like you said. And Cynthia agrees to it seems. She goes, all right, I'll talk to you afterwards. Girl goes and gets into an elevator. And all of a sudden, there is the specter of Harris standing next to her, and he just gives her a nice little wave.
Yeah. And
she freaks out. Elevator's closer. She runs up the stairs to try to catch her upstairs because she thinks something's going to happen in the elevator. So she gets to the elevator, and the elevator's opening and closing because there's a bag that the redheaded reporter lady
Miriam,
is carrying.
that's her name.
And then all of a sudden, something great happens. Did you hear the glass break and then she jumps out the window? You just saw
I think it was more just all at once. Breaks, she goes out the window all at the same time.
And I was like, that's awesome. Because when it splats in a very cool way. And I was like, all right, this movie's going to bring a little bit of the pain. I can do this.
Yeah, it's not afraid to get a little gory.
And then, so, once again, though, still kind of grounded. Was it a supernatural thing that took her out? Or did she just jump out the window? It doesn't really explain it. It doesn't really show anything to imply that the specter of Harris did it.
However, at this point, it doesn't make sense that she would have killed herself. Because she did seem pretty excited about the possibility.
Was leaving.
Yeah,
right?
she was like, I can do this. I can do this.
So then we get to the third round of Desmond, which was the one that I was excited for, the fan scene. And so what it is it's the couple that are in there.
And one thing we want to point out is, there are a lot of comparisons between, obviously, this movie and the Nightmare on Elm Street series. The victims in this movie, they're all adults.
Right.
Like Cynthia herself, she's like 26.
I would say they're all in their 20s, yeah.
All in their 20s, except for that, maybe the older couple.
Well, the reporter and then the older couple, you're probably looking at 30s, 40s.
40s, yeah. But Jennifer Rubin herself, she played a teenager just a year ago, but... a lot of people play older.
Listen, one of my biggest pet peeves in the 90s, and when we had all those people who were like 27 playing teenagers in movies like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and stuff like that. I was always like, I'm a teenager. None of the people I'm around look like this.
Right. I thought a movie that did it really well when it came to age-appropriate casting and where they were in life was Monster Squad. I like the fact all those guys were, of age.
Oh, yeah, they were just kids. They were teen. I mean, they had to have been mid-teens if it...
Yeah, basically.
So the couple, the fan scene that I was super pumped to see, the way Jay remembered it is not the way that it went down in the movie.
No, it did not.
So we don't actually, and this is the childhood memory aspect of it, where sometimes what you don't see is worse than what you actually do see. You probably combine those somehow. So the couple, he goes in the room, he's like, I'm going to get it. She's like, no, you're not going to get it. And then all of a sudden, they're in a boiler room. Once again, we were like, oh, that's very Nightmare on Elm Street there. And you see the large metal fan in the background spinning. And they walk over to the fan, they drink a little bit of alcohol, and it just kind of closes in on the fan. Now, I'm ready for them to jump in this fucking fan and go to town. But that doesn't happen. The electricity ends up going out.
Right.
And because they're still in the hospital, and everyone's like, well, what happened? So the guy who's the janitor, I'm guessing.
The maintenance guy, yeah.
Yeah, goes over to the door to try to open it to the boiler room, can't get in, so he goes underneath, tries to get in that way, I'm guessing into one of the ducts. And he tries to open it, doesn't open. The only thing I didn't understand was all of a sudden it starts to move them by itself. So there was almost the supernatural element to the lever. Yeah. And then it opens itself and the blood and the gore end up falling on him. And then a hand comes falling down too. And I'm like, okay, we both were like, that buys it back. We didn't get to see him jump into the fan, but obviously it happened.
You saw plenty of blood.
And then what happened after that was even better. Because it was in the ventilation system. The blood ends up spraying down on everyone. I thought that was super cool. It had a very Carrie type.
Very Carrie, almost Evil Dead type quality of just spraying blood.
It was great. I was like, all right, it doesn't matter. We didn't get to see him jumping in, but that bought it back.
And one character note about Harris, is the cult leader that we need to talk about is that he was burned.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah,
he was burned.
And so when you see him, it goes between seeing him as the normal cult leader to the burned Freddy Krueger type face with half the ear hanging off, which I freaking love.
Yeah, so they do transfer, so you don't get to see him just one. And the thing about him is he's genuinely creepy either way. He's a creepy looking guy. It's Richard Lynch. He was in Puppet Master 3. He was in a ton of B movies, B horror movies. The Irish actor. He's since passed, but yeah, he's definitely one of those that guy actors, especially in the 80s and early 90s. You were like, okay, yeah, this guy never played a good guy his entire life.
And there's a reason I think they cast him, which I kind of saw while we were watching the movie, but we'll get there in a second. 4 people were down already.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that kind of like hit me is they obviously have their group session, and like you walk in, and now all of a sudden there's like 3 people left.
3 left. And so Ralph, all of a sudden, he starts going a little bit loopy and wacky. And there's a scene where, I don't even remember what really happened, but he's sitting in his room, he's just chilling, he's kind of losing a little bit. He doesn't want to die. He keeps saying, I don't want to die, this is ridiculous, you can't protect me.
He's definitely, Ralph strikes me like he comes from money, though.
Yes, because he says over and over again, if I die, will you refund the money to my parents?
Yeah, and they're like, we're going to bill you if you keep doing this. Like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, because he ends up breaking like a clipboard or something. They're like, we're gonna send the bill to you. He's like, well, you can bill me for that. You bill me for every Tylenol you give me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
which I was like a little jab on the healthcare system. He's like, he's not wrong. When you have to pay $100 for Tylenol, something's incorrect there.
But the way he's acting out is almost like somebody who knows that it's going to be fine. Someone's going to flip the bill.
He's in his room. He's listening to, I think it was a Sex Pistol version of I Did It My Way, which I thought was kind of cool.
Is a cursed song.
Oh, is it?
On its own. Oh. Yeah, like, I have a friend who does karaoke. He told me about the urban legend about singing My Way. Like, you're not supposed to sing My Way because bad things can happen to you. It's considered a curse song. You can look it up.
Shit.
Just look up a curse of doing it my way.
Dude, I'm totally down with that.
That's why I thought it was even crazier that they were doing it, because it was like the Sex Pistols version of it. And first of all, he's got this big like hunting knife,
right?
And he throws his hand on top.
Now, he had mentioned earlier, whenever he gets stressed, he was a cutter, and he
likes to put holes in himself.
Yes, exactly, and he's got scars on his chest and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, he just puts his whole fucking hand through this knife. And his reaction to it was even better because it looked like there wasn't even a cut in the scene.
It looked like he was happy.
He pulled it out and he seemed like it calmed him down. It was bizarre. He wasn't acting like he was in pain. A little bit he was holding his hand, but it was more like he was admiring the blood. And you're like, oh shit, this guy's on the edge. Then he ends up fighting this cop, and for some reason they have somebody, he's like on watch, I think. He's like on 24-hour watch because of all the killings. Or murders or whatever they are. And so he invites him in and he says, I'm sorry for being a dick. And then he takes a coffee pot and smashes it over his head. Did he kill the cop? No,
he first goes, let me buy you a cup of coffee. Yeah. Okay, then he pours him a cup of coffee.
And then he smashes on his head.
Let me just say, if they've got these kids on suicide watch, this is like the worst hospital
it really was.
In the world. For people that are suicidal, so to speak.
But thank God they had the Detroit cop who was there 24/7.
Oh yeah, his beat. This guy's beat was this hospital.
Yeah, would you say it was like St. John's Hospital?
I mean, and I say his beat was this hospital.
He was there all the time.
No, from 1975 to when she was brought in. Like, the second she wakes up, he's there.
All the time. Because he would just show up like that. And you're just like, what is he, just chilling at this hospital at all times?
Like, everyone talks about, like, some of your favorite movie monsters, like Jason, how he just seems to, like, teleport to where people are.
Yeah, that's what this guy did.
This cop can teleport to where he needs to be.
So, Ralph, he goes and he gets Cynthia. He goes to her room. He's like, I'm sorry. And he's bleeding on the wall with his hand. And he ends up taking her. It was like, upstairs, but I guess it was the basement where all the files were.
All these old medical records and whatnot. And I must say, I used to work in medical records custodian, and the way he was just throwing files around was like, it gave me a little anxiety. just because I had a job like that.
And it was the inverse for me, where I would literally say to Jay, I was like, that's so fucking punk rock. Like, this is the guy I wanted to be when I was a kid, because he's just messing up a place. He's knocking shit over. He's hitting lights. He jumps off the wall and pulls the circuit board down at one point, and I'm like, that's awesome.
And he's like, I come down here because this place helps me unwind. I'm like, how much damage could you do to
this? And once again, who had to clean that up? Obviously he did that. So maybe that's what they were talking about earlier, because they said they had to clean up his messes all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this works, because this was my favorite scene of the movie, by the way, because he is being over the top and crazy, but it works because he's in the psycho ward and he is crazy, so it's great. I'm not really sure what the gist of the scene was. Either she's like, no, it's him, it's Harris, it's the ghost, he's trying to do it. The only reason she sticks around is because she's trying to talk him out of hurting himself.
Exactly.
And he's just like, I don't even know where he's at. He's in fucking Looneyville at this point.
Well, he's trying to, it almost seems like he's
trying to convince her that that's not real.
No, I think he's trying to convince her that it is real.
Oh, okay. Is that what it was?
Because remember, he takes the blood and he writes Unity on his on his arm.
I thought he cut it into his arm. He cut Unity.
He from the blood from that knife wound he had. He literally is telling her, he's like,
and he writes Unity on his hand, which was Unity Fields, which is the cult she was in.
And then he knocks over another scaffolding shelf unit and a bunch of scalpels.
And that's the scalpel scene we were talking about earlier that you remember.
And I do remember. However, one thing I did remember, I thought he stabbed himself in the neck, and he did not.
He ends up stabbing himself in the abdomen. And
pulling
it down. Oh, which I saw that you were cringing, and I just cringed now whenever I did it. But during the movie, Jay cringed at that. He was just like, ugh.
Any type of death scene or cut scene where I could literally see it happening in real life, they always tend to hit me a little more. Even though I'm like a big fan of horror movies, and I'm doing an entire month devoted to gore, I have days where I can't watch gory stuff.
Well, that's what you just said is perfect, though, because this movie is grounded. Like, none of these deaths are supernatural. They're all grounded. Real quick, before we get to why that's the key, though.
Yeah.
There is the scene wherever the guy who wishes he was Casey Jones ends up getting fired.
His name's Dr. Carmen, and then obviously he has his boss, who's Dr. Beresford, who's kind of the head of the psych department of this hospital.
I'm going to call him Glasses Doctor.
Glasses Doctor, yeah. He's another one of those just creepy character actors. Like I said, this whole movie's just got a whole bunch of character actors in it. There's not a real star in the whole thing. No, Jennifer Rubin is the star.
She is, but at the same time, this is character acting in heaven.
Yeah, all character actors. It's a big hodgepodge. I mean, literally, not one person you go, oh man, look. I mean, I guess E.G. Daily would probably have the best career out of all of them, at least from a financial
Well, I would say
standpoint.
Dr. Glasses. He's been kicking it for years. He's been in everything. A massive TV career, because you see him in TV shows all the time.
You saw him in TV shows. He was in Clear and Present Danger. Yeah, Harris Yulin.
I'm pretty sure he's one of the normal, regular judges on Law & Order Special Victims Unit. I think that's where I recognize him from. But he ends up firing Dr. Casey Jones, wannabe.
Yeah, because he wants to put Cynthia into isolation, which the Dr. Carmen does not agree with.
Because he's in love with her. I don't understand otherwise why he didn't want to put her in isolation. She obviously needs to be there. But it was a protection thing. He's like, well, if we isolate her, and she is causing these murders. So actually, Dr. Glasses was probably right about the situation, but he's playing into her psychosis.
He is playing into her psychosis.
He gets fired, and then we go to the scene where he's sitting in the parking lot. He took his box out full of stuff, Dr. Casey Jones wannabe, and he throws everything everywhere, gets in his car, and he sees Dr. Glasses coming out. So what's he do? Decides he's going to kill him. And you're like, Jay goes, I think this is a dream sequence. I'm like, I hope so, because it's kind of over the top.
It's very over the top.
And he ends up backing out his car and running into Dr. Glasses like 3 or 4 times. And I was down with that. I was like, this is cool.
And the infamous part where he hits him and he literally puts his hands in the air and screams, touchdown!
Touchdown! And Jay's like, I remember that!
Yeah.
And I was laughing. I was like, this is hysterical. But he does wake up from the dream.
After, of course, his car catches fire and explodes, which is very appropriate.
In the dream, which I was just like, is ridiculous. But he wakes up in the dream. He ends up going back in. I guess he ran downstairs to talk to Roger Rabbit, pharmacist at that point. I don't remember what the connection was, but he ends up downstairs talking to the pharmacist. And the pharmacist, he literally points out that all the drugs that have been given to all the patients are the exact inverse of the drugs they would need. And he's saying, well, this one would make them a maniac, and this one would make them psychotic, and this one would make them kill themselves.
Yeah, so basically they gave the first pill they talk about, how it's like, you give this to a normal person, they're walking off the walls. You give this to a suicidal patient. I think that was the one that Ralph got.
Right.
Because it makes you very, very hyperactive. Exactly. And Ralph definitely looks like someone who's got somewhat of an ADD, ADHD type, diagnosis. Those were ADD and ADHD have been buzzwords since I was, a kid. I know plenty of people have it. I think I had it to some extent. But yeah, they talk about all the different drugs. And so now you're coming to realize that...
What was the motivation from Dr. Glasses? Who was the one signing the drugs?
He's doing a bunch of research on suicide. What exactly that research was, they never really go into detail.
Doesn't matter. All that matters is he's changing their meds without them knowing.
To intentionally further to corroborate his research.
Right.
In hopes of, fame and whatnot.
So whenever Dr. Casey Jones wannabe figures this out, he runs back up the stairs to try to get to Cynthia to save her. Now, Cynthia... This is when she goes over the top because you realize she's drugged up on stuff that she probably shouldn't be on. So her acting becomes a little bit more extreme. Before then, it was all grounded. Now it's like a switch where you're almost seeing that, oh, okay, she is drugged up and crazy.
And don't forget, she does get visited by Gilda, who is the
Whoopi Goldberg girl.
Yeah, the Whoopi Goldberg, very stoic, out of the way, who is religious, who lets you know that there is a way for her to get out of this, and you're like, whoa.
And then she goes back to her room, and all of a sudden you see a shadow figure walk in, which builds into she is religious. She can see Harris, the cult leader. You don't see who it is, but you're like, oh my god, she can't. And she drinks, it looks like acid. Almost.
Yeah, she goes, you can't have her, and you can't have me, and she literally kills herself.
She drinks out of a pink bottle. You're like, that ain't Pepto-Bismol, and it falls on the floor. I think there was a skull and crossbones on the back of it.
Again,
and it falls on the floor.
This
and it
hospital, after this movie, should have been condemned.
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't just have shotguns.
Oh, yeah.
And all sorts of stuff lying around for anyone to use.
It's like, do you want to kill yourself today? Here are our accoutrements.
Here's a swimming pool. Yeah, go nuts.
And the thing is, too, when they were by themselves, there really wasn't anyone watching over them, which was bizarre. Like, the orderlies didn't show up until it was too late half the time, and most of the time it was Dr. Casey Jones wannabe, and he was way too late.
Yeah.
So, he goes to get Cynthia, and she's seeing Harris, she's seeing these she's seeing these visions of the cult leader Harris. How do they get to the roof? Do you remember?
He just takes her. He goes, come with me.
Come with me. But they end up going to the roof. He's trying to protect her from Dr. Glasses, and that's the big reveal. It's Dr. Glasses has been drugging everyone.
No, Dr. Glass is the one who takes her.
Oh, he takes her to the roof
because he hits Dr. Casey Jones with the chair.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right. He creeps in behind as he's trying to protect her
because he pulls the alarm that lets all the
loonies out.
All the loonies out, and a nurse just simply says, fuck.
Yeah,
it's just very, very honest.
Yeah, and it was very Detroit. Going back to that, she's like, oh, fuck. And that's what cracked me up, because, like we said, Roger Rabbit points out they're in Detroit. And Jay was like, holy shit, they are in Detroit. It's like, all makes sense. Which will actually play into what we're going to talk about here soon.
Yeah.
My favorite part of the movie. So anyhow, they end up on the roof. She has a vision that she is back with the cult, I believe.
Well, she's hanging on to the railing by one hand.
And that's right. And Dr. Casey Jones runs up, and Dr. Glass is trying to get her to jump, it seems.
Well, he's just trying to, at first he's just kind of trying to psychoanalyze her, which at this point it's like,
what's the point?
Yeah, at this point, dude,
what information are you gathering?
Right.
Like, you've already killed all these other people by messing with their meds. I mean, he didn't technically do it, but he did.
Well, that's the point.
I guess he just pushed them over the edge. I guess it's symbolic. He's about to push her over the edge.
By messing with their meds, he can kind of get them to kill themselves and without it actually leading back to him. It's like the perfect crime. In a way, it's almost like Saw, but at the same time, you're pushing them towards something.
And he's just giving them that little bit of extra push.
So finally Cynthia decides to
give in to the cult,
and
somehow she jumps and splat. We think that's what happened. She goes back to, it looks like a memory of the cult, or maybe an afterlife thing where she sees the cult leader Harris on top of the steps. She goes up to join him, and they grab hands. And then it cuts to Dr. Casey Jones leaning over the side of the building, holding onto her with his hand.
She didn't quite do it.
No, she didn't. So, really bizarre scene after that. He's trying to talk her into, grab your other hand, let's get out of here. And then Dr. Glasses is just standing there like, she doesn't want to come with you. She wants to die. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Why is he just egging him on? Like, this guy's just holding him. And finally, it gives him a little bit of a push.
He stabs him with
with a syringe in his hand, which almost causes him to fall off. But all of a sudden, fucking Murtaugh shows up.
Oh, yeah.
Out of nowhere.
What's going on?
And he's like, what's up, motherfuckers?
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is my favorite character in this movie, because he does not give two shits. And they end up, because the cops show up and a couple orderlies along with them, they end up getting her up. And they protect her, and then Dr. Glass is trying to pawn it off on Dr. Casey Jones.
Yeah, he's done this. Like, he's the mastermind behind this whole
everything that Dr. Glasses did, he's trying to literally just say that this guy did.
Yeah.
And then, as one of the police are walking by him, he grabs one of his guns. And then there's a standoff scene where he has the gun, and then he points it at Dr. Casey Jones, and then I think he went to point it at Cynthia, but she jumps up, and she rushes, and she pushes him off the side of the building.
Well, yeah, no, she sees, what I remember just what he saw is, he pulls the gun, she then sees one final vision
of Harris,
and then she pushes him off.
And
And
my favorite part happened after that. As he hit the car below it, went through the sunroof, went into the car, at that point, the Murtaugh cop just kind of shrugs his shoulders like, that's fucking Detroit, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he walks off like it's not even a big deal. And I was like, that is, yes!
I was like, listen here, man. If I was, on a case for, seriously, 13, 14 years... And then all of a sudden, okay, well, I guess we figured that one out.
I've never seen a reaction like that, though, in a movie. It was just like, hey, that's Detroit. fuck it, who cares?
So this in lies, obviously the ultimate plot point is the fact that it's one of those movies you can talk about, you can debate.
It was a Tyler Durden.
Because after the evil doctor was thrown off the roof, you do see Harris come up one more time and reach for her.
And you gotta have that final scare. And about halfway through the movie, I put together that Dr. Glasses and Harris were connected somehow. Now, I thought they were brothers or something like that.
Right.
But it was just the evilness. But the actors looked so much alike that I'm like, they've got to be related or something's going on and he's acting weird. I'm not really sure what it was, but he ended up being the true bad guy. And Harris was just an illusion for Cynthia, and because of her psychosis, she was bringing other people into it.
Right.
But because the only reason people were dying was of their own accord, based upon the fact that their drugs were mixed. It wasn't a curse. It wasn't anything like that.
Yeah. So whatever they didn't want to do, they would obviously do. I wonder what kind of drugs the reporter was taking, though. Like Miriam, what drugs would make you want to throw
I think it was their last dose, and maybe it was one of those things where that's all she knew. She just decided she wanted to go. I mean, it's flimsy at best. Why would people really... I've taken medicine that's not good before, and it doesn't make you want to kill yourself. So it's
in inventive ways, no less.
Unless these people were very... especially the fan one.
The fan, cool. We're going to do this,
I mean, they were drinking on top of their meds, because they had some alcohol. Which, by the way, how did he get alcohol into the fucking hospital?
Because, man, I'm telling you, there's got to be a strip club in this place, a shooting range. I mean...
That's why that's his whole beat. Is just that.
Yeah, this whole beat's this is the scariest place. This is the scariest place in town.
Dude, I'm going to tell you right now. I really like that movie, and I would highly recommend people check it out. It's worth your time.
And it's the 30th anniversary of it. As a matter of fact,
that's true. That's freaking awesome. And it's all coming back around, folks. You can just act like it's a movie that happened last week. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, you just throw out cell phones.
Yeah.
That's the big thing that tells you a movie.
Yeah, but they don't do any payphones or anything like that either. So
no, it's not. No.
In the hospital, you might not have those things. So.
And the whole thing takes place in this hospital.
What was the biggest thing that you, other than the fan scene, that you did not remember from the original? From however long.
Didn't remember what it was like. The cop, for some reason. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because he's so passive.
Oh yeah, he's not.
Because he literally he sees her at the house and goes,
It's almost like he's acting in a different movie.
And then he comes, he's like, she might have something to do with it. And then...
Oh, yeah, he blames her hardcore.
And then he just kind of goes away, and then he comes back and goes, what the fuck's going on here? He purposely just kind of morphs in and out of these key moments in the movie. Dean Cameron's death, I don't remember quite as well. I forgot A.G. Daly was in it at all. I mean, you
called the car scene was the one that you really called. You had that.
Oh, yeah, the car scene I remember greatly.
The fan scene... You had the gist of it. You can understand why you would think you saw that. And maybe there's another cut even. I hope there is, because I would love to see it. And then the cutting in the abdomen instead of the neck. I mean, that's obvious. That's that easy. I thought he was going to cut himself in the neck just from watching it. That's what it kind of sets up. So I can see you remembering it that way. Is there anything else, though, that, you had it pretty on point. You remembered the ending, too. You kept that for me, which I do appreciate.
Right,
I enjoyed the movie for that reason. But was there anything else that was really there that you didn't remember? You had it pretty down pat.
Oh, I didn't remember the scene where you actually saw the cult members catch on.
Oh, yeah. That was probably my favorite scene.
That was the biggest shock. Because, it's
there's something to the creepiness of that as the fire trails up on them. And it catches them, and the smiles on their face and the adoration's still there. And you see the flame engulf them. And they're still just sitting there. And like you said,
there's a little bit of wriggling, but I mean, that's just from, fire on you.
But dude, I'd never seen anything like that in a movie.
They weren't regretting it at all.
Oh, and the other thing we kept saying was the music. Let's talk about the comparisons to Nightmare on Elm Street. It was 1984, I believe.
Yeah, right.
The third one, which you could compare this to a lot, is because of the setting of the asylum. It was 87?
87.
And this movie was 88. Do you think this movie was made in direct parallel to Nightmare on Elm Street, and they used that? Because there are a lot of scenes in the music that feel very Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, no, I think... Oh, no, it maybe definitely borrows. It borrows greatly, but I think the thing that is the quote-unquote saving grace of the movie is the fact that it brings it all back to a place of reality. Again, this is something you can debate, but I think that there was some sort of supernatural going on. The one scene that Duck talked about was the hatch scene where the handle seemed to move on its own. Never explained.
But once again, maybe that was just the weight of the gore that was sitting on top of it.
Possibly, yeah. But it's never explained.
That's what this movie does well, though, is it grounds every murder, everything that you see, every death, I guess, is not murder, that you see could be reality. And it grounds it in that. So you're sitting there going, well, is it this or is it that? Is it supernatural or is it just these people are crazy? Genius move. Now, the movie doesn't seem like it was praised highly by critics. That's probably why it's fallen by the wayside and into obscurity.
Yeah.
But I do think it's worth your time and worth a watch, especially in this month of Halloween.
Oh, yeah, especially if you're looking for something a little different.
You could almost call this a thriller if it wasn't for the gore aspect of it.
Yeah, there's a psychological thriller. You know, everyone has their favorite go-tos, and Halloween, like in October, it's almost become like it's a month. You know, Halloween's basically just the cherry on top.
Well, let's talk about what you've been doing on Facebook with your posts. What is that again?
Well, that's the Ego Phoenix Fearcast. Like 3 years ago, I decided to do my own little just writing bit for every day of the month of October. And so I started in 2015, and I would also come up with these rules for myself. And I don't know, just kind of, and these rules helped me keep things fresh and also made it so that I wouldn't get so stagnant. So the first year I had a rule that I couldn't repeat a decade, day to day.
Okay.
So I had to jump from decade to decade, day to day, which is one thing. 2, I couldn't do the same director twice in a week. So I had to come up with different directors in different decades. So I really got to jump around on it. That was my first year. And then the second year, because it was the second year, I did all sequels. Mm-hmm. So it didn't have to be like direct sequels. It didn't have to be all number 2s. And then the last one, because it was 3, I did 3 for all, which is the first time I got to do everything that wasn't movies. I did movies, obviously, but I could do video games, comic books, pioneers in the industry. So I got to jump around. And then this one, the 4 one, it rhymes with gore, so we figured why not
Fuck yeah.
The gore forecast instead of fearcast. And so this one I'm doing a lot of the graphic movies, and that's my one rule is that they got to have some pretty graphic scenes.
And so if people want to read these, how do they find that?
You can go to facebook.com/egophoenix. That's EGOFENIX. It goes to my name. It's not a fan page or anything. It's my own personal page. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just Jay McClintock. But you can see them, and they have them all throughout the years.
Hey, listen, we appreciate you joining us, Jay. This is Duck, of course. We are on the Quack Attack 5000 network. This is Movie Amnesia. Please check us out there. We are Air with Jake and Javi also. And please leave a comment, subscribe to us on YouTube, check out some of our stuff. If you want to send me an email, hit it up at quackattack5000@gmail.com. Once again, Jay, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your October, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. And there it is. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have enjoyed it, please do not forget, share with your friends. That is how we grow the network. And if this is your first time listening, head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, and give We Are Podcast a like. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you're going to love the other podcast here on the We Are Podcast Network. We have We Are Bagu, a video game podcast featuring me and Dr. Ethan Eastwood. That's where we talk Atari to Steam and everything in between. Don't forget, Heroes Gyros, a Dungeons and Distractions side quest. Me and the boys were sitting down, we're playing some D&D, we're having so much fun. You can go and start that from the beginning of the journey, Season 1, Episode 1. You're going to love it all the way through. And finally, I hate being sober. Personal stories from epic people. I'm going to sit down with some of the most epic people I've ever met in this world, and we're going to talk about their life, we're going to talk about their trials and tribulations, and we're just going to talk about their journey this far. Head on over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /WeArePodcast. Also, head over to the Facebook group, We Are Era. We would love to see you in that group. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, share it with your friends. That's the only way we can grow this network. With that said, do not forget, support local comedy in any way that you can. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time.